can best introduce himself, but he is my favorite chef, and he's here in Cache Valley. When I moved here in 2018, I feel like Barney was my first introduction to local food, in the way that he prepares dishes, but more than that, his focus on sourcing local and not only highlighting our local farms, but oftentimes bringing them to dinners and so forth to really showcase the farms that the food came from. And so typically we focus, as a soil scientist, I focus on production type information, but I thought it would be fascinating to have a chef's perspective here today to really talk about, if you're interested in selling to restaurants, what are they looking for? How is it best to work with a chef? And so with that, I'd like to turn the time over to Barney. Can you turn your video on, Barney?
I don't know. I don't know what I've done. It had me unmute.
Oh, I
Let's
unmuted
see.
you. That was me.
Okay, the
All
host has
right.
asked you to start your video. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Perfect.
Sorry. And
Welcome.
I'm in the middle of making some pasta right now. It's my day off, so I'm cooking at home. So yeah, I've known Melanie for a number of years, and I know some of the other attendees here on the Zoom. I'm a Cache Valley native. I've been cooking for uh, a lot of years, a lot of years. I started working in kitchens when I was 16, and yeah, I am a Cache Valley native. I do love my community. I love um, the local producers that we have. And I love working with our local farmers. I mean, so what I'm working on right here, it's a pasta dough. This is some local organic flour from Central Milling and I did not plan this. This just happened. I thought that the Zoom meeting was going to be just a little half hour thing. And then I jumped on for the practice session and have been on for the last like 2 hours now. And it's a lot of great information. I'm loving all of the information that I'm hearing, and it's very interesting. The talk about dyes. I'm probably never going to dye any fabrics, but yeah, local cattle rancher, love it. I don't I don't know if I've ever used any of their product specifically, but very interested in the Wagyu uh, cross and the domestic Wagyu production here in Utah. But I think that what we're focusing on for my portion of this is how to sell your products to chefs, so those that are producing food. Um, how do you either make those connections or how do you grow those connections? And uh, yeah, I'd say, depending upon what your operation is, um, it's getting out there and meeting them. Myself as a chef, I strive to try and make it to my local farmers market, to connect with those farmers. But, the farmers market's on Saturday. That's not necessarily accessible for a lot of chefs. And so sometimes it might take pounding a bit of pavement, knocking on some doors, you know, and you've got to be um, kind of, I guess, you've got to be considerate of a chef's uh, work life. And we're working when everyone else is playing. When you're out to dinner, when you're out having a good time, we're the ones that are there trying to provide that good time. And so um what you you know what you want to do is think about those times when it's not like, say, a crazy busy lunch rush or um, a big dinner event. And then also, growing things takes time. So you might have a bunch of stuff for sale right now, but I'm having to plan, for the week and for the month and for the quarter and kind of for the year. And so trying to get your foot in the door uh, can be a bit of a time-consuming process. So, just like we're in February, and if you're growing tomatoes, you either want to start or already have your seeds in the ground, right? And we're looking at June, July, August before you're going to have those tomatoes. So now, just as you're planting your seeds, is probably the time to start making those connections of where is my produce going to end up. Um, so, you know, don't be afraid necessarily to go and, peek in the back door. Um, if it's like, say, a nighttime business, go knock on the door at like 4 p.m. And yeah, the front door might be locked, but the back door is always open. We're there working. A chef's uh, work life is usually pretty crazy. We're usually 12, 14-hour a day workers. And yeah, we've got to have a lot of planning. So even if you don't have um, something to give or something to show right up front, just making that initial connection, having a business card or a handshake or this is my telephone number, this is my Instagram account. We working in the restaurant industry also rely heavily on the social media factor for promoting our own products and showing our own faces. I mean, yeah, Melanie, you and I were Instagram friends, and that's one way that we've communicated um, through the past. I know uh, that's. I want to say that that's one way. I believe this was like right before the pandemic. We were discussing, I think, strawberries or something, trying to find a way to get uh, something from the USU greenhouses onto the plates of locals. And yeah, I know
Yeah,
that that's
squash, winter squash. I
oh,
was
was it
doing
squash?
trials.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, yeah. I
close.
maybe I'm the one that floated the strawberries, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, squash. Yeah, just yeah, and that's the thing is that's basically all it takes. Obviously, pandemics and everything else aside, um, that threw a wrench into almost all of our gears, especially myself in the food industry. 2020 and 2021, even to a larger aspect, were the two hardest years of my career, just because of all of the hoops that we had to jump through. We were dealing with a lot of regulations. I remember having to wear gloves for 14, 16 hours a day, because at the time, before a lot of the information was out, we were required to treat food packaging, like your to-go bags and your to-go boxes and everything else, as ready to eat food. And you can't have any bare hand contact. And so basically, you're just constantly wearing gloves. And so wearing gloves constantly for 14 hours a day caused me to have the most intense skin rash that I've ever experienced in my life. Oh, on top of everything else, the world was going crazy, and some people just hold themselves up, and a lot of people were doing sourdough. I didn't get on the sourdough trend until this last year for my own home sourdough starter, and that's actually what my pasta is being made with, is with my sourdough discard. But yeah, just now I feel like I'm rambling. I'm all over the place, but yeah, finding a way to make the connection and then kind of maintaining that connection, I would say, would be first step to building your connections with your local chefs. And I know that as a chef, I have, for say the farmers that are working the farmers markets, they love it when I come up and talk to them, because they know that what I'm going to buy, someone might come up and say, yeah, I'm gonna get a couple cucumbers, a couple tomatoes, but I'm the guy that will come up and say, how many of these do you have now? How many will you have next week? And how long are these gonna last? How long are these gonna be in season? So, if your standard consumer is gonna say maybe buy 1 pound, I'm going to say, I want 50 pounds now if you got it. I want 50 pounds next week. And then I got an event coming up next month. And if you've got 100 pounds, I'd love to take that. These are not relationships that I've just been able to, I guess, step right into. These are things that have taken time. And so knowing, I guess, if your target audience is myself, like a chef, and knowing what they want, um, yeah, it might be a certain product, or it might be a certain varietal of a certain plant. Like if I could find anyone growing fairy tale eggplant specifically in Cache Valley, I would, I mean, even for my own personal, I would be cooking that and laying it up in my freezer to eat all year long, all year long. But just even yeah, I love eggplant, but if I saw anyone have fairy tale eggplant, and if they didn't have very much this year, I'd say I want, X amount of bushels for next year. It's yeah, not just the certain product. It's not just uh, whatever. I know that like the heirloom tomato thing is kind of a good metric for this, because we all know that a standard whatever, early girl beefsteak whatever tomato, it's great and it's way better than anything you're ever going to get out of a grocery store or from any food service provider, um, that you're ever going to get, if it's direct from your garden or direct from your local farmer. But the heirloom varietals hold so much more value just because of uh, there's the flavor complexity, there's the color pop, there's the, just that diversity. And it can, kind of like with the, when we were talking, or when he was presenting about the Wagyu, so you've got your Angus and you've got your Wagyu cross, and then you've got your Wagyu 3/4, and how, those are different price tiers. It's kind of the same thing with that. So it's not just producing something that might not be your everyday person's big ticket item, but if you can make connections with chefs, things like purple carrots, or just interesting or unique items. If you're growing bell peppers and jalapenos, you might want to diversify. You might want to grow some shishitos. You might want to grow some padron peppers. And that also, looping back in with the social media thing and seeing food trends, it's not a bad idea to be kind of relying on those trending hashtags, or what's going on right now, and beyond Facebook and Instagram, other platforms. I know TikTok is. There's been a lot of that this year, with the ban and everything. But yeah, just diversifying even in your social media, um, I guess, platforms. You know, yeah. Wow, that
So
was that was that was a ramble.
no, that was fantastic. You had me at fairy tale eggplant. That's one of my
Fairy tale
favorites
eggplant. Do
too.
you know anyone that grows fairy tale eggplant? In like
Not beyond a garden situation.
I've
But
seen it
so first
one
off, I want to
time.
know, what do you love about fairy tale eggplant? And then also we've got a question about just more specifics on things that local chefs like to buy. So I'm hearing kind of unique things um from
Hmm.
you, but what are the food trends? What should be on people's radar?
Well, and that's the thing, is like every chef is gonna have their own perspective, I mean, what kind of dyes do dyers want, and what kind of cuts of beef do beef eaters want, and what kind of flowers do flower people want. It's a broad and wide, diverse category. So depending upon what your setup and your situation is, you know, uh, we live in Utah, and what are some of my favorite things? Well, yeah, the summer tomato and peaches. Those are. But the difference between those two is you can produce a tomato in, 120 days, 90 days, whatever, depending upon your varietal. Um, you can produce a peach in like what, 5 years? So yeah. Um, but yeah, that goes back to the point of creating those those connections. And if you're growing something anyway. So it would probably take a little bit of legwork on your part to get ahead of the curve with, if you're growing peppers, maybe get a few varietals, because you never know what, there might be a chef out there that wants bird eye chili, and he does not want the shishitos. But if you've got one plant and you're the only one the corner on the market, and you can plan for the next year. We meet with our farmers in the off season when they're getting ready to plant, and they say, "Okay, we're getting ready to plant. What do you want? What are some things that you want?" And sometimes I'll bring things up, and sometimes they end up growing things that I never would have even thought of, or they grow things that I'm just like, well, what are these? Like Jamaican gherkins or the mouse melons, if you're familiar with those. They're just like little tiny cucumbers, and they look like a little tiny baby watermelon. And it's just something that I've never seen, or never seen in my area before, never seen like at the local farmers market. And so I'll buy it all up and figure out something to do with them. And those were a really fun project. Uh, yeah, so what it is that people want, well, um, it's kind of that wow factor, that pop factor. If you're growing radishes, well then yeah, watermelon radishes have a lot of pop, depending upon who the chef is. Like I love it when I go to the farmer's market and I see a lot of daikon radish, because I know I'm going to make a big batch of kimchi that's going to last me all through the winter. And I'm going to be able to make some, Korean stews or something. But it's going to depend on, what I say that I want is not going to be everything that every chef wants. And so that's where the building of the connections comes from. And so even if it's just going into a place of business and being a customer, and if that's cost prohibitive, because the higher end products are going to have higher end prices, and that's going to be a higher end dinner. Yeah, making that connection on the back door. You've talked about the dinners I've done where I've introduced the chefs. I've done multiple or the producers. I've done multiple like nose to tail dinners where I want the farmer to come and attend, because I take one animal, and we've got a group of maybe it's like a couple dozen to maybe 70, 80 people, and we're all eating the same animal. And I'm trying to do the justice to the animal of you know uh, highlighting every part that we're using, and we do try to use every single part of the animal that we can serve. And I definitely want to introduce the farmer, because they are the person that raised this animal from birth, and they gave it a good life. And these are farmers that I have good connections with, that maybe it was on their end, or maybe it was on my end, or somewhere in between, that the connection was made in earnest to um, connect the food uh, to the community. And food is a very communal thing. I think that the dinner table is the ultimate what I guess meeting place. It's like culturally the best way to find out about someone's culture is to share a meal with them um, from their culture. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. There's a few questions kind of related to that. So one is just in developing these relationships. I imagine it's a lot more work on your end to have relationships with different farmers. Is there a certain number that you're able to kind of keep up with? And if you were to establish a new relationship, does it help if they bring samples? I'm reading from the chat, samples of produce, is that helpful when they're visiting and trying to connect?
Samples are always helpful. I mean, it's February, so you're not going to be able to give me a sample tomato, right? So, photos, your social media, these are the varietals that I grow or I'm planting right now. These are what I'm growing. Is this something you'd be interested in? Um, and in person is going to be your best way. Um, in my experience, the best way to actually make those connections is going to be in person. So, going and knocking on the door, like I say, you can hit them up with an Instagram DM, you can send them an email. I've had those, but having a face to a name and, having that direct eye to eye contact is the best way to build those connections. Um, but yeah, anytime you have a sample, that's great. Sometimes I've even had farmers just kind of show up at the back door um, of the restaurant, like after the farmer's market, and they're like, "Hey, we've got this stuff left over. Can you use it?" And sometimes it's just gonna, go into their compost bin. And if I've got free product and it's otherwise gonna just become compost, then that's a great way to introduce your product without a loss, and it adds value to me because it gives me something to see and something to look at. There are all sorts of different, and it's not just marketing, but the marketing points as far as are you organic or are you third generation or are you uh, whatever your story is, make sure that that becomes part of the story. And so, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. If you don't mind, we can run through it. There's some amazing questions
No,
here
please, yeah, shoot them at
to
me.
ask you, and I feel like they're just going to continue to highlight some of the things you've already talked about.
Like,
So this first question that we have has actually got three parts, and I feel like you've kind of answered the last two, but I'm just going to read them all off anyway. The main one
mm-hmm,
is just, could you talk
by all
about
means.
decision to partner with local growers and producers? Why do you do it? That sort of thing. What's important for us to keep in mind when raising, processing, and producing? And then finally, what foods are you as a chef always in the market for? There's a lot.
Wow. Wow.
Let
That's a
me know if
lot.
you want me to repeat
Okay.
any of
Yeah,
these
let's
parts.
break this back down. So
Okay,
first was
breaking it down. So the first is, can you talk a bit about your decision to partner with local growers and producers?
I think number one, oh wow. I mean, there's so many aspects, but I would say number one is, quality, freshness, the carrot, the tomato, the potato, onion, whatever that you get from your local grower is far fresher and therefore what I feel is higher quality um than anything you can get from, yeah, your local grocery store or your, Sam's Club, Costco, or your food service provider, whether that be like, so locally here in Utah, we've got like Nicholas and Company, or nationwide, you've got like US Foods and Cisco. And yeah, I mean, why do people shop at natural grocers for their vegetables versus Walmart? I would say it's quality. Yes, you're paying a higher premium, but it's first and foremost freshness and quality. Uh, the other thing is, I feel like uh, I really like to vote with my dollar, and that goes for so many things. But investing in your community, it's been shown that uh, for like every dollar you spend in your community, 80% of that is retained within your community, whether uh, you know however that's uh, spread out. But that's way better than spending your money on some national big box or corporate food producer, whatever provider, where you're not retaining that same dollar amount into your own community. So it is me investing in my community. I know that me buying a bunch of vegetables from one local farmer might mean the difference between, oh, What's okay? That's the pull. Might be the difference between, you know, uh, his family vacation with his kids that year, or I mean, and that's just one aspect, but um, also, I get to have eyes on product when I'm buying locally. If I just, place an order online for something through a food service distributor, yeah, I'm getting a case of bell peppers. I have no idea what those look like. Are my red bell peppers still partially green, or are they nice and vibrant red? Are they going to be mushy? Are they going to be big? Are they going to be small? There's so many different aspects, whereas I can go and I can literally pick out each piece of produce or each lot of produce, and so I already know what I'm getting, and I can be able to start my planning for what I'm going to use this produce for. um, I think that's as much as I
That
need to
answers it
ramble
so
on
well.
that.
No, this is such a treat
What
to
was
hear
the
your
next one?
perspective. Well, I think you covered that question pretty well, and this actually is a great segue into another question, which is kind of the opposite, is there produce that you have a hard time sourcing from Nicholas or Cisco? What are some
Oh,
unique or yeah, take it.
so many things. That's the thing, is like there are certain types of produce that I only will ever see at my local farmers market, like beignet potatoes, or that the fairy tale eggplant. I've seen it
Very
one
good.
time. I grew it one time. They had some plants at the greenhouse, that's over by where Crumb Brothers was. They had it one year. They never had it since, and I've never seen anyone produce it since. I've eaten it several times since then, not in Utah, but yeah. um, but yeah, like certain specific varieties of things, I would say. Uh, Definitely, yeah. Can I list all of them? Probably not right now, but you know, if you are looking in, if you're a grower and you're looking at your seed catalogs, you know, instead of looking at those, you've got your categories and you've got your first few big options. Those are the things that everyone's buying, right? Look at the last options. Look at the end page, and if it's something that you've never heard of before, um, then chances are a lot of other people haven't. But we're chefs. We're kind of obsessed with, yeah, the varieties and if everyone is growing black beauty eggplant, well, it doesn't matter who I buy it from, right? Not necessarily, but overall, yeah, kind of. So yeah, if you see something different, if you see, yeah, some Thai eggplant seeds, you never know. It's just that variety. Yeah, it's the spice of life, and we're chefs. We love spices, so.
So there's a few kind of logistical questions, and I know we're running up on
Yeah,
time
I'm
here.
looking at the clock. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no, maybe you can stay on and answer some of these after our next speaker gets started. But are there
Mhm.
any, I think just, are there any inspections or certifications they have to be able to sell to you? And kind of on that note, is there a minimum quantity? Like I can't just come over with a small bucket of peppers, I assume.
Um, Now that depends. That's going to be situation to situation, and that's why you need to make the face-to-face connection first, because those communications can be made, you know, uh, yeah,
Okay.
between, yeah, the chef and the producer. Um, but as far as certifications go for fresh produce, I don't think that there's any kind of requirement as far as like USDA or anything. And I think that even goes for, I want to say that goes for even eggs. I think eggs have like a few things. They have to have like um, dates that they were laid, and then usually you have to have it's some kind of contact info, um, as far as yeah, I think it just has to do with like contact information. You have to have like a telephone number, an email address, and then maybe a physical address of where it was produced. But beyond, like, unless you're trying to be USDA, organic certified or something like that, then I don't think for fresh produce there's any kind of